I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Tim Van Patten, the Emmy-winning director who is helming all 8 episodes of Franklin on Apple TV Plus. And Tim, I want to actually ask you about that. You know, you're known for episodic television, and is there a different challenge knowing that you are at the helm for the whole thing?
Well, there's definitely challenges. One being I don't like to whine or complain about anything, but shooting just an episode of television is exhausting, emotionally, physically. But shooting 8 is ridiculous. I've shot 5 and not quite in a row, but 8 was a lot. But the upsides are huge, right? So it's better for everybody, really. It's better for the cast to have a single voice and vision. It's better for the writers, so that we can really communicate, and I can execute based on these conversations. And I just feel like, for me now, having done it, it was probably one of the most satisfying experiences in my career. The bigger challenge really was, because we shot most of it on location, almost all of it, we had to block shoot, which is, so we had to shoot by location. So we had to track every location because we really couldn't go back. A few instances we could go back to these locations, but they're so far and wide apart that economically it wasn't sound to keep bouncing around and shoot in a linear fashion. So we shot in blocks of locations. So that meant for the actors and the department heads and myself that you, in any given day, you could doing scenes from 1 to 8 episodes. You could do on a day of shooting, you could do 5 different episodes of the show. So everyone had to be on their game. And the seasons, of course, change. So in the show, because it takes place over 8 years, people get older. So we had to adjust to all those challenges on set.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically because, this is such a specific period, and I had read somewhere where you were like, "Can I please do something contemporary?" But one of the things that was interesting, I was speaking to Jay Wadley, the composer, and he talked about how you wanted this to be a period piece, but that was real and gritty and not like this fluffed up period version of 18th century France that people might imagine or are used to seeing in these films. Why was that important?
Because I feel like today's audiences are really sophisticated. They're sophisticated. They've seen so much. The bar has been raised so high. I mean, it'd be sort of ludicrous to shoot this in any other place, have it all in English. You've got to deliver on authenticity. And I think that's important. And also, you have to be entertaining at the end of the day. So it doesn't want to be a dry piece of history, your grandfather's Benjamin Franklin. I think you could do this with almost any historical story. You really have to dig into the character, especially with Franklin, who was such a complex character. There's so much there to work with across the board. And so we want to bring him forward and see the world through his eyes and make him feel very much alive. And we wanted to really delineate the social strata of the period, which is very important to the story. Just another thing that's important. There were so many things. We wanted to get that all correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you treat just France as a character in and of itself. It's so integral to everything that happens that it almost feels alive. How did you go about accomplishing that?
We had great department heads, and the idea was that we would try to make the world feel as visceral as possible. And by virtue of using, with the great cinematographer David Franco, who I did Boardwalk Empire with, and Perry Mason and Masters of the Air, we had great shorthand. We chose to shoot with anamorphic lenses, and at a 2:1 aspect ratio, so you could stretch the frame. So within each frame, you'd get a lot of information, like on the periphery of the frame, but in the center of the frame was the story. but everywhere else, the world was very much alive. And we achieved that with our background casting people. We cast each face specifically. Our assistant directors were giving each person on set a very specific thing to do within the frame that was researched. Like I got to research with all these historical pieces. One of the best things I get to do is to sort of immerse myself in the world. Dig up a piece of something from a book. There was this great book called Panorama of Paris, written by an eyewitness in the period of time. And it had everything in it, little vignettes. And so we just put a person in charge of vignettes, and they would go and say, let's set up this here and over there in the corner there, because you didn't want to interfere with the story as it was unfolding by cutting away to some like, oh, hey, look what they were doing at that period of time. It just wanted to be all breathing and living within the frame.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is so interesting about this show is that it's almost like it's not like Michael Douglas obviously is at the front, and obviously he's, you know, number one on the call sheet and an executive producer, but it does feel like it does have this strangely kind of ensemble feel that extends from the top of the call sheet to those background actors. Every frame feels that way.
I'm so happy that you got that, because that's how we wanted to approach it as an ensemble. And Michael was all for it. Michael was all for it. And I think it blew him away, you know, the level of cast, you know, with our English actors and our French actors, right down to the day players and the background. Very often, we would even pull background and give them lines. You know, we were just on the spot, and they never failed. It was really amazing.
Well, and you talked also about the importance of it being in French, and I think there's a tendency, I think we've been conditioned to have these stories, no matter what time period it is, told in English, oftentimes with British accents for no apparent reason. Why was the why was the French so important to the story?
Well, look, it's all a big magic act, isn't it? It's some smoke and mirrors, but I think that for me, the audiences have gotten very sophisticated, you know, over these last 20 years. You know, the bar has been raised so high that their expectations are like, don't wait, if this is in France, they should be speaking French, you know, and that was really important to us. And, you know, sometimes it gets to be a conversation about how much French and how much English, and, you know, you find a nice balance, but it has to be authentic. And I think this show managed to, it never felt false. When the French were speaking to each other, it was in French. You know, Franklin did speak French, but terribly. And that was part of the gag, you know, that he was sort of the part of his journey, you know. So there were opportunities there for humor and other things.
Well, and returning to Michael, I think in other series there would have been a temptation to put him under mountains of prosthetics, but I found it really interesting and a really fascinating choice to just kind of let him embody the character rather than mold him to look like the character. I assume that was also a conscious decision.
It was, you know, I mean, we were probably both very nervous about all of this in the very beginning, and that, you know, when it all just seems like a great big mountain to climb. But we did the due diligence. We did try the prosthetics and applications. You know, we just wanted to feel good. We wanted to see it. So we tried them on, he did it, the hairpiece and everything else. And it just created a layer between, I felt like it created a layer between the audience in terms of accessibility to the character. And Michael's spirit, you know, it was really Michael, you know, his spirit sort of embodies Franklin. He pulled it off, you know, Franklin warts and all, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. He captured it. And I think he was a really interesting point of access because he was familiar, you know, and I think it was a nice way for the audience in. And, oh yeah, I love this guy, I know him. And then within 5 minutes, I never thought about it again.
Which is ironic because it also kind of mirrors the way that people of that time would have thought of Benjamin Franklin as this person that they know.
Yes, because he was considered quite a rock star there. He had already been there once, and it was it was more or less as a representative of our Congress, while we were fledgling, and he was beloved. He was a beloved, because he was very libertine in his attitudes, and he was a very contemporary thinking person. I think if you were to walk into the world today, he would adjust to it in 2 minutes, Benjamin Franklin. He was just that kind of person. And the more you read about him, the more I appreciate him and his sort of forward thinking.
Well, I want to ask you, just in terms of your own career, you kind of came to prominence at the dawn of what we kind of consider this golden age of television with The Sopranos and Deadwood and Boardwalk Empire. And I'm curious now, with some years between that, how do you think television, just as a medium, has grown and changed? And how has that provided you with new opportunities?
Well, as always, it all boils down to script, and being exposed to quality work. And I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of, extraordinary writers and actors, and I've learned a lot. And it's all about the fact that quality will rise to the surface, and building a family, finding the right piece of material, developing the right piece of material, building the family, building the world, executing. The way I approach the work has never changed. I personally may have changed, in that I'm more relaxed about it and that I see the world differently. But to me now, I see it more as a life experience, not just a career thing at all. It's really about the journey at this point. So that's how it's changed for me. In terms of when I started out, there was 3 networks in the 70s as an actor, and then now we have all this opportunity. I just look at it as opportunity.
So now that you have, again, now tasted this opportunity of seeing a whole project all the way through from a directorial standpoint, has this experience made that experience more desirable in the future? Or are you like, no, I think I'm good for a while?
I'll be lying if I didn't say it was exhausting. But you know something? I loved going to work. I normally do, but I really loved going to work every day in Paris. But the truth is, I love my job, and I always try to make sure that we're a family and we build a family. That means something. It's on the screen. I always say it. And I would do it again, but you better know, you better have some passion.
I don't think that could be better said. Tim Van Patten, a great pleasure to talk to you. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the upcoming award season, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders in the coming weeks. Tim Van Patten, a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.